Ladies and gentlemen, we want to welcome you to the Unadulterated Thought Podcast. Thank you for stopping by. We hope that you take the opportunity to learn something new. And if you're new to this channel, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get all the new updates coming soon. Now, I'll turn it over to your host.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Unadulterated Thoughts Podcast. I'm your host, Big Jim, and today we have a very special guest, right? The reason why I am who I am and have these thoughts and ideas is generated from this person sitting right here next to me. No other than Mrs. Linda Cherry.
Ooh.
How are you?
Hi, how are you?
Well, today's episode was inspired by you. You're the creator of this episode, in a sense, of this series that we're going to be doing. So we're going to have a series of episodes that are going to be dealing with voting and politics and that kind of stuff. Just kind of talk about some stuff and get some stuff.
I wonder why you would choose me.
I know, right? Or you chose me, right?
I chose you.
So let's get right into it.
Okay.
You know, without further ado. So today's topic is vote.
Simply
Vote.
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 Interesting.
And Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines voting or a vote as to express one's views in response to a poll. So all you're doing is giving your view in response to a poll. They want to know what the question is of, you know, or who are you choosing? What's your expression? What do you like
in response
to a
to
poll?
a poll.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting way to put it. Especially in light of all the types of polls we have nowadays.
Right.
You know, whether it's what type of soda you want to drink, or what presidential election candidate you go vote for. I mean, there are a lot of polls, right?
Okay.
So every time we see one of those, you say we're giving our opinion, right?
Yeah.
Well, when I'm speaking of voting, if I were to be personal, my main thought now is about what's going to happen on November 3rd.
Okay.
That's my primary thought. That to vote means me, Linda, is going to express my opinion about who I believe is capable of governing this country. Period. We have any number of reasons as to why we will choose the candidate, of course, but the whole purpose is to express an opinion. To not vote to me means that I'm not taking the time, the liberty that is given to me to express myself. And we do this legally. And to think about it, that it's only been in a little more than 50 years that we finally have been able to get the right to vote and it not be interrupted officially.
Okay.
There's different states doing what they wanted to try to stop us from doing, giving our expression of opinion about whatever poll. But it is a very difficult thing to realize that some of us just will not express themselves and vote.
So let me ask you this, because that's a great segue to the first round of topics or things I want to discuss. So, and I'm saying it personally because I think each individual person has to look at it personally.
Right.
You know, so the reasons why I'm doing the decisions I make have to be personal to me and you. So I'm just going to take it back, and you don't have to necessarily go way back, but just at a prime time of voting in elections, I would say in the 60s and 70s, right? Would that be a pretty prominent time of eras of where voting was like strong?
Right.
So what happened during that time for you personally as to the reason why you're so adamant about making sure that you actually cast that you give your opinion?
Well, I watched actions of my mom. Remember that in the 60s, especially the early part of the 60s, I was still a kid.
Okay.
I was born in 53. So you're talking about me being 10 years old, 10 to 13 years old. And the actions I saw in terms of voting and the right to vote, I watched my mom and how she was involved with the NAACP in order to help to get us to have the right to vote. I know she did that. I know she worked with affirmative action cases because she had two that I know of that she worked on in getting, with her being the first black to be employed in what they used to call the aircraft companies, Hughes Aircraft Company, Douglas Aircraft. She was the first black to be hired because of even with affirmative action, okay? But the whole thing, though, is that she taught me how important it was to speak up about the injustices. I watched her do it. So me learning to speak up came from her. And look like the older I get, the more I'm like my mom in that it is so important that we have this right to exercise it. You got to remember, I'm one of the very first in a generation. As I became an adult at 18, I had the right to vote. Not too many people before that time that are in my age category
That makes
were
sense.
allowed
So
to
you were
vote.
the first group
One
of
of the
people that got
first.
to actually exercise all that
You're
hard work and struggle. It's like, okay, now I'm legal.
right.
It happened before. You can kind of see the struggle. Now that I can express that, I'm going out and I'm doing it. Okay.
So I never missed a beat. And I would go with my mom, and we would vote. And I saw her passion as to why she felt it necessary. So I followed after her lead.
Okay. So let me ask you this, though, because you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I do want to talk about it, and that's the discouragement behind it, right? And I'm looking at it from a standpoint of, is it important? Is it so important to us because you can't do it that you really like, I just got to do it? Or is there some other underlining things? In other words, I want to be able to do it because I'm trying to make this point. Like, because remember, it's about us giving our opinion on a poll. So those polls could be the person itself. It can also be on a legislative matter or some laws
Whatever
and
it
stuff.
may be,
It may
right.
be. So at each level, how do you see that? Like, as far as, is your focus more on, I want to get a certain law or something passed that'll benefit me? Or is this more on, I'm just more general and say, hey, I like the fact that, this president base represents as a whole and this, and I go from there.
To me, it goes back to just civil rights.
So you're saying it's more of because it's allowed to happen. I want the same rights as the person. I want just the same rights as everybody
I
else.
want to be able to do it because this country systematically refused to allow me to do it.
Got it. So you wanted that freedom to be like, you know what? Let me express myself.
Well,
Let me
if
put it down
I
like
am
everybody else.
considered a citizen of this country, why not?
Definitely.
That's what the whole issue was. When it came to Martin Luther King and that movement of the 60s, one of the primary things they were fighting for was the right to vote. That whole movement was about the right. You're talking about showing equality from one person to another to have a right to have a say in this country. Up until then, well, except for maybe about 6 or 7 years, when we had the Reconstruction period, that was the one time blacks were voting. And you're talking about after the Civil War for about 6, 7 years. After the Civil War, we were allowed to vote, even had people in legislation. But the South says, oh, no, we're giving too much power to these black folks. The threat was there. And they removed the threat by instituting the Jim Crow laws. So they have had their knee on our neck all this time to keep us from having an opinion because of the fear of the power that comes within our community or anybody else, especially of color. You got to remember, the Native Americans didn't have the right to vote. Now, who was here first? So you're looking at where it has been a systemic issue to keep us from voting. So for me, with all of those who marched, all of those who died, Lamar, all those who died because they were so determined to have the right that we now have. And I'm going to sit back and say, I don't mean nothing, don't matter because of who's running or whatever. The issue is not so much the person to me, it is the principle of why. Why am I voting? Why am I going to choose Biden over Trump or Trump over Biden? What would be my reason? And it's going to be whatever principle is going to be guiding me. You know me, you already know who I'm going to be voting for. but but that's really the issue here. It's not that like I said, I'm one of the first in a generation that had the right to vote from the time I was 18 years old on. The ones prior to me, no. So I think that it is critical. It's a principle.
So let me ask you this: when it comes to and I'm still talking about the discouragement part, because I can, for example, even myself, there's been times where I remember when I first could vote. I think the first time I did, I think we went together, and that almost as a family, everybody went right that day. I think, if I'm not mistaken,
I believe so.
Everybody who was over 18, we actually went together. But then there were some years. There's been years where I haven't voted, and sometimes it's been because I'm not educated enough to know what I'm voting for. You see what I'm saying? Like, I get it, and I get the causes. I can always relate to a civil issue. I can always relate to some brutality. I can always relate to those things to say, hey, I want the candidate that is against or that doesn't want to see that happen, right? That's cool. But then there's always more to it than just those civil issues. You know what I'm saying? So my thing has been, it's some of the things I see that has discouraged me is, one, is lack of knowledge. Two, could be just being informed of the real policies and what's going on. You know what I'm saying? And then not only this, I think this is the major one of not knowing how it affects me and how I can benefit. See, if I don't know that it's going to benefit me, then I'm not even
going to get involved.
Well, I mean, and it's the thing. It's not that I feel that the ways and the path that you guys paid was not for a reason, because once again, I do agree that the civil issues are important, but the fact that we should all have a right as a American citizen, member of the country, to do this one thing. I definitely want to be able to do that. But now that the freedom is there,
then here's my issue. I grew up at a time where I know that there were individuals who who did not have that right.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about it, that means my mother was in her 30s, man.
Mm-hmm.
In her 30s. So their passion was different than yours.
Okay.
You've always had that freedom to be able to vote. The discouragement is that we are taught not to become involved in politics because nothing's going to change.
Or the difficulty in it. If you make something difficult for people, the more difficult you make it, the more it's going to discourage you, which is key.
That's right. Because you look at what's happening in certain states like Georgia, South Carolina. You got people to this day that are determined to not allow people of color to vote. Why? Because we've got that kind of power. The discouragement, though, is when you find it in people who feel, I cast my vote, like in the 2016 election, the popular vote goes over and says we have one person who won for president, but the Electoral College said something else, and look who's there as the president. That becomes discouraging. Or we pass legislation that's supposed to help the inner cities. The neighborhoods are supposed to be the disprivileged, the disadvantaged, the whatever you want to call it. And there's no change that people can really see. How many neighborhoods do still struggle with a decent education, with good jobs? Just the basic. How about decent, healthy food in the neighborhood? And so how we vote, who we have in office will help to legislate how we even get our products in that way. If we don't fill out the census, then there's not going to be any money. Well, that's all part of a legislative issue that's going to come up. If we do not vote, we do not get people in there who are going to be able to support us. So if I'm discouraged because I feel like my vote doesn't matter, then my thinking is way off. Because I believe, too, that if we were to realize the power that we have, then we could make the changes that we want. But we get too discouraged and say, well, I don't know. I don't want to get involved in politics. I'm supposed to look at the sin of people and where people are having their personal problems and all of this stuff. And then yet I'm not concerned about the big social issues.
So let me ask you this then. When it comes to the social issues, or just voting as a whole, right? What I'm seeing here now is that the process or the actual act of casting the ballot, to me, is the end result. But there's other steps that we have to do prior to casting our ballot that will help to strengthen our ballot. In other words, if I'm looking for something, I'm looking for a change, right? We all want change. We want things to be better. Prior to me casting my vote, somebody needs to know what my vote is going to be as far as legislation or anybody who has the right to
That's the
make
problem,
the
though.
opinion,
How many
or make those
people do
changes.
you know are really involved in dealing with the issue of politics?
So let me ask you,
because it's so
it is
negative,
but
right?
think about this though. If it doesn't directly affect me,
But
that
see,
I
you
can see,
think
it doesn't. But it does.
You think it doesn't.
You think it
You
doesn't.
only think it
Because
doesn't.
it's not. You know what it is? It's not on your mind on a daily basis. Well, okay, let me ask you this: when it's not an election time, when it's not election period, just say it's next year or whatever. Are you really thinking about the next 4 years as far as what you want as an individual? As far as politically, are you only concerned about it when it's time for action to vote, and then all this other stuff comes up that helps to persuade where I go?
Boy,
See,
you forgot who you asking.
but you get what I'm saying?
You
Like, as a
know
human,
me.
as a person, maybe you, but
You
as
know me.
okay, but let's talk about, let's say
you
me.
know me. If I'm always wrapped up in politics, right?
Okay.
For someone like you who may say they're not, that the interest peaks because there's an election.
Or
then
because of
here's-
an event or something,
Or some event,
some event
right,
that
right.
happens.
Or how many more people have to die in the
Right.
streets before now I'm concerned about the politics of it all.
Mm-hmm.
See, now we're into a serious civil rights social issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not until it touches me personally for many that they will get involved, not understanding that everything that we do has some political aspect into it in some way. If it's just the laws to get the food on the table, we're affected by whatever governmental actions are taken. I'm not saying that we should be so totally wrapped up in nothing but government.
Yeah. But
we got to
regularly
become
thinking about it.
aware. The fact that so many of our people are unaware, young people especially, if you're not aware, it's because you don't care. It doesn't affect you personally.
But it will later, and that's what I
It
think
will
we see.
later.
And that's another thing I think why when you look at the voting, they always want to start really to me with the kids. And the reason why is because in a few years they're going to be the ones that are concerned. See, when I'm in my teens, really don't care. My parents
Unless
is
you're
taking
like
care
your
of
nephew.
everything. Okay, well that's different.
See, he has a different mindset. He's young, but
he's thinking about it.
really is already into it.
Okay, so
You have some. It depends on probably how important they feel that the cares of other people is important. If I'm concerned about what I get, what happens in my household, in my family, then I'm not concerned about the rest of the world. But when I'm concerned about the needs of others, that I don't like the idea that you have any child who would go to school and does not have a decent education or proper representation, then I find me being concerned. But unless it becomes personal for many, they're not going to get involved. You know how many times you see on Facebook, for example, that where this is going to be on, right? And how many times have I seen those little hidden messages to Linda that says, "We don't want to see politics on Facebook. I come here to get away from it all." And I'm like, okay, then why are you putting your head in the sand? Because I'm going to tell you, you're going to have to lift that head up after a while, because this coming, you're going to have to deal with it one way or another. And today is one of those times when you're going to have to deal. So get your head up out the sand. At least you will know in advance. The problem is trying to get all of this and figure out what all the hoopla is about when it's been building on for 4 whole years. This election is this whole issue hasn't just started. The day that man was put into office, you know who I'm talking about. Soon as he was placed into office and it was official, then the struggle for me began. So I've been working on this mentally for 4 years now, where for others, no, they don't care because they don't want to be bothered with politics. They're too wrapped up in something else.
So let me ask you this, because you kind of touched on a few of them, but I just kind of want to put it out there a little bit more. What are some of the issues that you feel are important, or what are the issues that are most important to you as you look back and you look at the candidates as far as why you even would choose who you would choose, and you say, you know what, these are some issues that I would like to see change, or the things that, you know, I said, because I know you mentioned some food stuff, you mentioned education, that kind of stuff. What would you say?
First, character.
Okay, because let's stop there. Stop there. Character. That one is a hard one for me. You want to know why? Because none of those candidates do I personally know. See, I can be influenced. I could watch TV. I could look at news clips and videos, and everything that I see could be what you want me to see. But do I really know what your agenda is and what you're really about? So when I judge you based on your character, can I really find somebody that's 100% the character that I need? No. That's not going to happen. And is it based on...
That'll never happen, though. I don't even 100% know your character.
Not 100%.
And you're my son. Think about it now. You're my son. I don't 100% know your character. I see what I see based on what you produce in front of me. When I look at these 2 candidates for president, I see one who has a certain set of behavior patterns and thought patterns that are spoken. Another one has another behavior patterns, thought patterns that are spoken, and they are in direct conflict to each other. For me, it's a clear path because one exhibits the kind of behavior I want to see in my leadership. The other one has nothing whatsoever to show as a leader that he's even capable of being in leadership.
So how do we know that what you're seeing is what it really is? In other words, let's say I have an agenda, right? And my agenda is I'll pretend to be your friend. I'll say I'm your friend, and I'll even say the things that make you like me. You see what I'm saying? But
isn't that what Cohen said this morning when he's the lawyer that used to be for the current occupant of the White House? And he said he took the time to try to reshape the image of the person who is now in office to help that individual become more presidential. I'm sorry, but it was a joke. It did work because he could not change him. He could not change who the man really is. See, that character will show who are you. You either have a heart to do right or one is going to do wrong.
But isn't that the reason why if you ever notice when it comes to politics and period, especially when you talk about anybody, that they'll go back and look at all the dirt that they could possibly give up?
Of course.
You know, to be able to say that you're not, you are, you're not.
Evolution of a person as well.
Okay.
Where they hit one candidate, right, for things that were done in the 60s and 70s maybe. Okay. Certain legislation which passed, ideas of busing and all this stuff came out, right? And the thinking at that time, well, 40, 50 years later, the thinking is a little bit different.
You're talking about the same
evolved.
Person as this person has grown as an individual.
And we can change.
Gotcha.
I know I've changed.
So a lot of that then has to do with the fact that you've been paying attention for a while. In other words, I may have seen X guy when he was 20 years old or 30 years old when he first started out. Maybe I agree or I didn't agree. As time progresses, where is he headed and what has his storyline been overall as opposed to a specific issue?
Well, both of the individuals that are candidates now for president have a long history in front of the camera.
Okay.
Okay? One in politics doing one thing, the other one talk about the Central Park 5
Mm-hmm.
putting out $1 million ad in a newspaper in order to help have 5 young boys killed. He was pushing for capital punishment. And the thing is, they didn't have their facts straight. You know, I mean, that's the type of character. He deliberately even tried to sabotage the first black president with the whole birther movement. We're talking about character. That underlying issue of racism has been in this country forever,
Mm-hmm.
is showing itself full strength right in front of our face through the character of the person who's occupying the office.
So let me ask you this. And this is where it's going to get a little interesting. And this is the part that I think it's important to,
Okay.
which is even though
Even though
we do not agree with somebody's morals, right? I look at this guy and let's just say he's whatever negative that he could be towards me. He is that person, right? Can we still see, or can you, or you don't have to make it personal, but do you think that it's important to still see the benefits of having that person? Because I think a lot of times when we're so bombarded with the negativity of somebody so much, even though time and time again it may prove us wrong, it may be proved as right, do you think that we still have to say, you know what, I still got to find that good? And isn't that what we want for individuals, even ourselves as a person?
for me, character begins it all. If I know and I've observed you as a liar, how do I trust you? Regardless of what you tell me, regardless of what you try to make me believe are the advantages.
Was there actually real advantages? Let's say, for example,
could
I got
be.
legitimate advantages for you, but because you don't like the fact that I don't like you.
It's not just about that.
Mm-hmm.
To me, the issue of character rises above that. It does.
Okay.
That's just how I feel. I cannot follow after someone that I know really can't stand me as a human being on the planet. I'm not talking about we have disagreements and I don't like this person. That no. I'm talking about me as a representative, say, of our culture that overall has absolute hatred. Unless you got some money, can help buy him something, get him someplace, give him some prestige. No, man. The character. I don't care what good he says he's done, but truthfully, the bottom line motive in his character is going to show me whether or not what he says is really beneficial to me. He says, what about tax cuts? He's giving out the biggest tax cut there's been ever. Woo!
Mm-hmm.
But underline, who is he benefiting?
But can you make it benefit you?
Do I have $1 million income?
I don't know. I don't know. But are you striving to get things that will help you to benefit?
That's not what's important, though. Money is not all there is. My agenda does not roll with just money.
So let me ask you this then. Okay, so let's just move the money to the side then. Forget the business aspect of everything.
Woo.
Right? Business aspect, kick to the side. We're not even worried about that. We're talking about strictly values and morals, right? So now, this is what I want you to do. Just think about it. I don't even necessarily want you to answer necessarily that part, but think about this. Is the person that I'm voting for have my same underlying values as the person that you are? And can you prove that? And if so, to me, that would be the key to say, this is why I'm voting for this one, if morals, and that is the most important part.
The only proof that we're going to have is what the person displays and what they write. That's the proof. We look at their
or
behavior,
in the actions,
their behavior and their actions throughout the years. We watch that. We watch that. Forget some of that other stuff. Like you said, put money and business and stuff aside. Look at the things that have happened. What appears to be their motivation?
Mm-hmm.
Is their motivation centered around caring for other people?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it trying to take someone and squash them down and that me feel superior above someone else? See, that's what I'm looking at. Not just that they say that their business deals or whatever is good. And it may in fact be. But my problem, mine, Linda's problem, is that I have a hard time wanting to agree that someone is a good leader for me who I know does not have my best interest at heart based on what they've said and done. Forget all that other stuff.
So let me ask you this then. Once again, I'm going to go back to what I was saying earlier about the pre-vote. This is what I'm going to say. The pre-vote to me is what I'll consider the actions that we take prior to actually casting the ballot, right? So in your efforts to, I'm going to say pre-vote, are there any things that you would like to see? Okay, well, let me rephrase it. Going into this election that's coming up for the 2020 election, if you were to get rid of these two issues, let's get rid of COVID. Let's act like COVID doesn't exist, right? And let's also act like the series of murders that have happened never happened. Let's get rid of those two things. Mm-hmm. What would be some things that you would see would help you to vote for who you vote for? Or are there some issues that you were looking for to say, this is what is important to me?
Besides go back those two to where we started, which would be with the economics of a community.
Meaning what? What is that? What do you mean by that?
Well, in other words, how many people in this neighborhood have good, steady jobs where they are living above the poverty level?
Okay, let me ask you a question with that. Living, and we're talking about economics in a sense, but not so much the business side of it, but just economically.
Just basic living.
Do you feel that if, as an individual, I learned how to personally handle my finances, that would help me to get out of that bind? Like, a lot of us are in a bind that we really don't need to be in. So there's some more underlying issues. Like, I can all day say it's the government's fault. Give me free this, free that, free this, whatever, and be legitimately a need.
That's a
versus someone who.
That is really an excuse to say that, because to say that you don't want people to have the free this, that, and the other, the only reason those things even exist is because the opportunity to really get what you want in certain areas is not there. If you start off with a C minus education, how many black men especially in the 1960s who were identified as nice kids, they graduated them from high school because they were nice kids, but couldn't care less about their ability to read and write, and gave them a high school diploma and allowed them to move on. Why? Because they didn't care about their level of education.
But once again, when we talk about history, talk about history repeating itself. Isn't that the same thing happened with the whole No Kid Left Behind movement? You know, you might have saw it prior to in your generation, and then we did it again in the No Kids Left Behind movement. And then again, it could happen with all this online education. So once again, just like economics, I'm going to talk about the education. The real fundamental thing to me, it should be coming from the house. And I'm talking about, when I say the house, I'm talking about the.
What if the parent
has
not been properly educated and have that responsibility to educate that child who's at home? Why do you think there's a problem? See, if the parent does not understand algebra, and their kid is struggling with algebra,
how are they going to teach them?
And you're doing this, and there's no one to really tutor the child, what are they going to do? They're in trouble.
You know
so
what I think
if the education is not there to begin with, which is the problem, the issue of education is not just now. this has been a problem all along. Separate but equal. Well, we had separate but not equal.
So let me ask you this then, because when you go to school, I'm just going. I can only go from when I for myself as far as going to school. And you're talking about education. You're right. Some of it has to do with the school and the surroundings, but I think another important factor in it all are the going back to the discouragements and the distractions of things that will prevent you from doing what you need to do that I may have caused or that other issues in say family or whatever may have caused. In other words, let's just say
the issues though of discouragement will happen when you get to a point where you feel like, what's the point? Why should I even try? And people have given up. How do we get past that with a group of individuals who have been beaten down so long and they don't see the light at the end of the tunnel? Because their situation has been so bleak so long, that's all they know. So, and systematically, they've been held in that position forever. And it goes beyond them who is alive now. It's going back. And that same behavior, that same stuff has rolled on generation after generation. The point now is to stop it. So how do we stop it? And that's where the problem is. So for me, for education, for example, is that parents are going to have to understand that I do not have the resources, if that's true. But the resources need to be available for me to go get them. So and if they're not available in certain areas, where do you go?
So let me ask you this. Would you consider, was your mom an educated person or strong on education?
Yes.
Okay, so that's kind of like the lineage of where you got it from. In other words, my mom was strong on education. She then taught me that and passed it down.
Right.
Okay, so it's just,
right.
I mean, but,
right.
and that's the hard part to deal with because everybody, you got to remember, it is so many different variables until you can't really say a blanket statement for everybody. And that's what's hard. So even as we're trying to make decisions, what is the best decision? Because if I look at it,
what's best for you at that time.
So if what's best for me, let's say, for example, and based on my life and the way I've been brought up, right? Let's say my parents were strict, right? Very strict, where it was like, do this, do that, more militant style.
We were.
Nah, not, well, kind of, but very militant style of a group of people. Yeah. So what my mindset is always going to be is that pick yourself up from the bootstraps type mentality, which, you know what, you got an opportunity, you just need to make the best of it and do the best you can. But say somebody else.
You've lived that, though. You've lived that. You've lived a situation where things have happened and no one gave up and found a way to move beyond it. That was already within the character of what you've been raised with. That's already here. There are many that that's not true for. And because of that, telling them to get up and put themselves up, the question is going to be, well, how? How do I get started? Where do I go? Who am I going to see? Who's going to help me?
And I think that right there, to me, is the mentality of a lot of young people. Because okay, it's like this. I want to do better. There's nobody who wakes up, I'm sorry, I've never woken up any morning and said, you know what, I want to be a C student. Nobody comes up and says, I want to be mediocre or average.
No, mediocre,
right?
Nothing, right.
You want to, as you grow or do whatever, you want to
get better.
You want to be good. So when you have that mindset, but yet you don't even know how to take the first step, or you're so wanting to take the first step and not knowing where or what to do,
then it has to be something within the person that would give them the drive. If I didn't educate you, do you believe you have enough
to educate
to be
yourself?
Able to find out on your own? Have you been nurtured enough to be able to say, well, if I don't know, my mom and dad don't know, maybe they'll give me a direction, or I can find out on my own and have the freedom to do that. Where others, they may have been so placed down and so locked into control until no matter what happens, all they can say is what you tell me. You know, I'm a robot.
No, but that's important. Okay, and we're talking about education again. If let's just say I'm a person who doesn't know how to read, and I'm 30, 40 years old, right? At some point, I can teach myself. When you get to a certain age, there's really nothing that you can't teach yourself if you simply study it and take the time to do it. You may not be able to do it as a kid. You may not be able to do it when you're younger because you don't know what you can grab or what resources you have. But the more you know what resources you have, as you know you have a resource, if you use that resource and maximize that, I think you can teach yourself how to do anything. So I don't think we
I
should
would
put.
take exception to that where you have those who do not have the capacity.
Oh, see, once again, another variable
You
because
see what I'm saying?
mental capacity
See,
could play
that's why
into you not being able to do
The
it.
issue is not to blanket everyone with the same
Yeah.
brush.
That's
And
the- I think
if
that's-
someone has a mental, emotional, some
Mhm.
type of impairment, social impairment,
Mhm.
they may not have that resource from the inside to be able to have the strength or to know how to do it. So to say I can do it all on my own, some can, but too many cannot. And we have to be there to help to facilitate that.
But I think it's important for the ones who know how to just do it. If we at least start there,
Now
and
that
you'll
I
see
agree.
a big example. Let's say, for example, I'm just gonna give some numbers, and I'm not saying these are any stats because they're not stats. I'm just throwing out numbers. But just say 1,000 out of 1,000 people, you have all these variables, but we know that out of 1,000, say 400 can just do it. I think that 400 just needs to do it, and we'll worry
Okay.
about the other underlying issues of the other 600 later, or not later, but we can deal with those in a separate way.
My problem is when we go black and white. Why not all? This group of people have the ability.
Mm-hmm.
This group of people does not.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would say the people who do have a responsibility to help those who do not and help to educate them to the point where they can and can develop, because we don't want to assume that they can't learn. See? And that's one of the problems, to assume that because it's not already in that community that they can't appreciate it or do anything about it. And then you want to know, who am I going to vote for? See, it's just something like this that says either you have my best benefit in mind. You have me in consideration of what you're going to do, and you're supposed to be representing me. But if you are not representing me from within you, and you're caught up in yourself and how I'm going to build me up and get my reputation, and the world will follow after me, and I'm going to give you some serious Kool-Aid, man, and no matter what I say, you're going to be in agreement with me. No, 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 no. No. We have to be careful even in our black and white thinking. It's not always either or. So even with the candidates, when you're talking about voting, I may not be particular about either one. That's true. When it came to the last election, presidential election we had, and I cast my vote, there were things I saw with both candidates that were running for president. So I had to make a choice. But for me, the choice was easy because I've watched a pattern of behavior. So the proof to me is what you give out. I don't know no more about you than you will allow me to know about you, right?
True.
So if that's the truth, then if you're allowing me to see the good in you, even when you're under pressure, I still see the good in you, that says something. But if I don't see the good in you anymore and you are way over here, then I'm going to have a question. Uh-oh, what's up? So that's my issue with that.
So we talked about education a little bit. Are there any other things, some civil issues or any other issues that you would like to see addressed?
In terms of me casting my vote?
That are key for you?
Well, I keep speaking about economics because the biggest issue for the so-called disadvantaged communities is about money. It comes to the economics.
Okay.
It comes to, can I put food on the table? Can I pay the rent? the utilities? Can I ensure that my kids have a decent education and the clothes that they need? And so if I don't have the money to buy, I don't have the opportunity for jobs. Jobs will not open up in my community. And I got to go way out. That makes a difference.
So, as I hear you saying or talking about that, and we're talking about economics, of course, I do think that there are some times where, because of lack of understanding, that we can think that we're at an advantage or a disadvantage.
Absolutely.
Once
We don't know.
But once we take the time to get involved in something,
If we take the time to get involved in something.
When I say I'm talking about economics, I'm talking about as far as like our personal finances and that kind of things. Really what I'm really talking about, more of our personal stuff. If you take the time to learn more about it, then those become freedoms.
I need to know that I need to learn something.
Okay,
Do
so let
I
me ask
know
you this.
that I need to learn? I know my situation, but
so there's no situation that I can think of that doesn't have multi-levels to it,
Of
right?
course.
So if the fact that I have money, don't I want to know as much about money as I can? The fact that I'm in whatever it is I'm in or I'm doing, don't I want to know as much so at least I can play the game? Because I can't play the game. I mean, I can play the game.
That's your mindset. How many people have you heard of who
So let me ask
have a
you-
substantial amount of money, and what they do?
Live paycheck to paycheck.
Well, even more than that, they
Or
get
they
it,
waste
and
it.
it's gone. You know, it's gone in a short level of time because they didn't know what to do. See,
But let me ask you this,
having
though.
it
Is
doesn't
it-
mean you can manage either.
Okay, so the disadvantage then can also be an advantage for either side. Like the fact that you don't know could be an advantage if I operate on a small scale and I'm not thinking about doing much. But I
I'm not
know the
thinking of
basics.
business aspect. Of
I'm not talking
money
about
and
even
all
if
that.
even if it's just 1 + 1 is 2. You know, I know that if I make $5 and I spend $6, I spent too much. You know what I'm saying?
Because
Or
I'm
what if I-
borrowing into the other $5 I'm going to
Exactly.
get,
Or
right?
if I make $6 and I make $6 and it goes and I only spend $4, then I know I got some money left. You know what I'm saying? So it doesn't really have to be complicated. I just think it's just something that has to be discussed and dealt with.
Well, we deal with that with children, though, right?
But that's what I think.
that's
But that's what has
where
to
we
happen.
can
Where we have to
begin.
go back to the fundamentals of kids and what are they learning in school that will also help them to get that knowledge if they can't get it from home. See, I get it that we can
Okay,
say,
now
well,
there
at
you
home.
got a point.
Now
There
I
you
get it
got a
where when I'm
point.
at home, I get it. I may not be the best example of this particular thing here. And when they go to school, school doesn't teach them what they need to know. So now the home doesn't have it, doesn't know it. The schools aren't going to give it to you. And in order for me to get it from a school that still won't give it to you, I have to do what? I have to take you to somewhere else and hope that you have an understanding of but how to put other things together.
But to
So-
begin with, I
but the
got
basic
to
things-
understand I have the need for it.
So
I
then,
gotta have
let me
the
ask you, so
need
is it
for
really
it.
an issue then?
So then the issue to me when it comes like to voting is I have to see that the need, the necessity, the importance of me casting my vote
So let me.
at all times.
So just go back just to the financial thing just real quick. If I don't know that there is a problem or there's an issue, and I think that what I'm doing is correct, I have no need to change anything.
Right.
So then is it good or bad? Is it an advantage, disadvantage? Now, the
You
fact
don't
that,
know
let's say,
that it's a problem until it becomes a problem.
but what
though,
if it never
right?
becomes a problem? And the fact that I didn't maximize what I could have in this arena that's the disadvantage that I bring onto myself by not learning or knowing more about what it is I'm trying to do.
When you're unaware, you're unaware. The issue is, do you have the incentive from within or someone to help you to find out what it is that you don't know? You and I are curious creatures. We both do a lot of reading and trying to look for answers. There are many that don't and will go only based on what you tell them. And if they're not hearing anything,
They don't know.
so if people discouraged about voting, then the issue is you're going to have to, one, develop a passion enough to at least want to know why. Why am I so passionate about this particular election more so than anything else in my life, as opposed to those who say, well, it is what it is.
So let me ask you this, just one more question before we go, because we're getting close on
Okay.
time.
Okay.
So my question for you is, what would you like to see personally as the future in voting? What would you like if you could paint that pretty picture of what it would be for you based on the struggles you went through, the things that you've done, the roles you've played? How would you like that future to look?
It is to do exactly what you were just talking about: educate, communicate, inform people of the importance of voting, why that democratic process is important, and not to just lay it on the side and say, well, maybe I'll do it the next time. Every time you don't, you're addressing that poll and saying, I'm either going to offer an opinion or I'm not going to vote at all. And then complain because you didn't do anything about it. So, what I would love to see is that the very issues that you brought up, to eliminate all those excuses, got to make sure that people become aware. But then you have to put an interest in them. How many people do you know that are so locked in a certain belief system that they say, I don't want to have nothing to do with politics? That's not my thing. Well, I'm sorry, but whether you want to talk about the separation of church and state, for example, even when you want to separate it, it's still not separated.
You can't.
You're still going to be involved in some way or another, you know? Even to keep your 501c3. There are laws that are preventing churches from doing certain things. Some are limiting them where they feel so limited, they're afraid to speak and cast their vote. I want to see that gone. I want people to really have an understanding that you cannot separate your life from politics. Forget it. It's about you. It's about how you're going to live and the lives of your children and your grandchildren and great-grands, and you keep on going. It's going to be about all of the generations to come. What we do now will affect them. Your baby is going to be affected. That when she turns 18 in 12 years, that she will have the right to vote. And what is she going to do based on what she's learned up until then? So what do we do about this? We've got to make this a priority again. Where in the 60s it was about not being allowed to. Well, we've been allowed to, supposedly, right, for over 50 years. And yet still we have the mentality that says, I don't have it. Doesn't matter. Doesn't care. Why should I worry about it? That was back then, 50 years ago. 50 years is not a long time in history. It's not. You got people alive now who have not had it. So for me, I want to see where everyone is energetic into getting involved. I'm not saying become political so much as that becomes your life. No, become aware of why it affects you.
Okay. Well, let's do it like this. I know you kind of gave it to me, but if there's anything else, you have any other final thoughts you want to add to the topic, to the discussion itself?
No, not really. But I do want to say thank you.
Thank you.
You're a brave man.
For me, I think my biggest thing as far as like taking away really is we have to make it personal.
Yes.
And we have to, at some point, really decide what's in it for me.
Yes.
And whatever that is, that's what I'm trying to achieve. And the moves that I make are to make it. And when I make it personal to me, I also want to have others who we believe the same thing to also come and join for the bigger picture. So until I find, or not until I, but until you find those issues that are important to you, and you just begin to work with those and do what you can, just join the team that's for those issues.
Have to have hope.
Something, and that, oh yeah, and that would be my next
Keep
thing
the
would be
hope.
hope, definitely. That if you look at the role, if you're looking at 50 years, we're still a baby in a sense. So a lot of discouragement, heartache, pain is going to have to come through before we can actually do it, or just put in our minds. More people have to be aware of what's going on, and then as our eyes open up more, is to now we can dig deeper into other issues and expand and grow. So I think that we cannot let what we hear discourage us.
Right.
I think we can't let we can't even be emotional. I think that sometimes the emotions have to be removed. Or are we making a decision based on emotions and that? Or are we making a decision
I don't know
based
how
on...
it would be possible to eliminate the emotion.
But I don't mean eliminate it. What I more mean is don't let emotions be the main reason why you make a decision. In other words,
Well,
I don't
think
want...
about what's happening now, though. The reason why the movement for Black Lives Matter is as strong as it is now is because the emotional component of the world has finally been tapped into, and that they're seeing with their hearts that what has been wrong forever is wrong. Where before I could put it over there on the side and not emotionally become involved.
No, what I mean by that is I get what you're saying and I agree, but I'm looking at it more, for example, if what's like I said earlier, if you eliminate the COVID and you eliminate the murders that happen, would you still be sensitive to those issues? And if they are, be as sensitive to them before they become a problem. In other words, I'll give you a quick example. I can look at something like police brutality. I can look at my experiences with police, both positive and negative, right? The negative ones, whatever I personally dealt with, that's something that I should deal with, or we should deal with prior to it adding up or till it gets so bad. What I'm saying is, in a community, let's keep it real. Look at the community that we were born and raised in, and look at all the police brutality that happened that never even went past the block. You see what I'm saying? It never even got past the block. I know friends who have gotten beat up by police, handcuffed, beat up by the police, and let go. Say, hey, you know what? That's pretty much your payment. You good to go. Like, these things have happened. So what I'm saying is, that is when we have to make those changes and be
But
involved,
it's
not waiting
of the
until
emotions that will come behind all that injustice that is done, that it gets you involved. See, many people can't really get involved into something unless those emotions are there. We cannot dismiss them. We cannot just put that over there. That's compartmentalizing something that is so much a part of us until no matter what, it's still going to be a part of who you are. Remember when you'd have problems going on and the guys that were part of the supposed gang, you know what they call the police? Look at the gang. That ain't nothing but a bunch of gang with a badge and a gun.
But when I get that, there is a group, it's a society, it is what it is. But me personally, I don't want to make a decision that's going to affect the rest of my life or a large portion of my life while this law, whatever is in place, or this person's in place, strictly on emotions. You know what I'm saying?
No, okay.
I don't want. That's really what I'm saying. Strictly
Okay.
on. I'm not saying that emotions have to be
I'm not
discarded.
Either.
What I'm saying
I'm
is,
not either.
if everything around me, and this is what I really my key, even about this election, with everything that's going on around me, it's creating a large emotional effect. When I remove,
it is designed to do it because when you know that too often something horrible has to happen before there's some change.
So let me ask you this.
So then it is the change too often comes as a basis of something getting up the emotions of people. That's unfortunate. It took the death, watching it on television every night.
So let me ask you this then, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. Even when it comes to that situation, had these things not been on the TV, on the radio, we know about it. This is what I'm saying. It still would have happened. We would have known about it, but now that because everybody knows and it's more in my face, that then becomes the reason why I make a decision. I don't think that should be the reason. I think it
That
should
would be now, but think about it. Certain issues have never changed. The reason that, say, the 65 riots occurred is because of police brutality. That's what sparked the 65 riots.
So can we get riled up and involved with and as a community for other reasons besides brutality?
Well, when does it become something becomes important to you? That's the key.
No,
here.
it does, but it doesn't I look at
Not
that as
just
a deterrent, though.
No,
To me, it's a deterrent.
But see, understand, with the issue of police brutality, we're talking life and death situations here. Someone is threatening our community to kill us. How about that you have people who are trying to get decent food in the community? Why? Because the health of the African American community and Latino community is horrible because of the foods we eat. So we have to develop a pattern and concern for the community to want to have this done. So that's where, but only way that will happen is people have to become invested, and it's not going to be all psychological. It will not be right just off the top of the head to say, okay, I know intellectually I should be doing this and this should be going on and all that. No, if you don't buy into something until there is some sense of an emotional connection, and then and only then will you operate. I can know police. I never really experienced police brutality personally. I watched the cops pull you over, remember?
Mm-hmm.
We pulled right behind you, too, because I'm like, oh, no. Mama Bear was getting ready to get up out the car and find out what the heck is going on. And we watched to make sure that they didn't do anything to you, and they didn't. I don't know what they said, but I know they didn't touch you. So I can't say to me your mom has ever really experienced it. Not police brutality. But I can give you some other stuff that we could talk on another day where it had an effect upon me. And how it is that helped to shape my thinking as to whether or not the person I'm going to vote for in November is the person I'm going to vote for. See, my whole life issue, all that we relate to all throughout our life, everything that we deal with is going to come up to that day in helping us to make the decision. It begins when we're children. It does. We will incorporate all of that in our lives. Our life experience is going to guide us whether we will go to the polls or not, whether we're going to cast our vote or not, or I'm just going to complain about it.
All right. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to wrap it up, and maybe we'll come back and do after the election and kind of see how that goes, But
hopefully with good
once
news.
Again, thank you. I appreciate you coming. For all of you guys in the audience, let's just make sure that we're liking and subscribing, sharing, and all that good stuff. Definitely. So we'll see what happens in the next couple of months with this whole issue. But I think, too, one of the main things is just to, if you feel the need to exercise that vote, do it.
Absolutely.
And make it, and like I said, make it personal. Find out something that's in it for you. And if nothing else, at least focus on something. If everything around me is hectic and crazy and not what I want, can I just find that one thing that I can cling on to say, hey, my vote got me this,
even
and
if life is
wonderful. Yeah. So you can always pick something.
Right.
So that'll be, so thank you again to everybody. Don't forget, like I said, like, subscribe, hit the thumbs up. And then don't forget, if nobody loves you, God loves you.